observe those who have lost loved ones in the military. So we just want you to be mindful of that, and for those who fought so that we might have freedom. And so we want to acknowledge those families and those who lost loved ones.
We do want to acknowledge also, we want to say hi to Kim Mobley, Sister Colbert, Sister Mincy, Sister Josephine Talbert, Sister Brother Aaron Johnson, Sister Scott, Brother Black, and Sister Moss. Thank you so much for sharing, Brother Gaynor, and Sister Speller. Sister Lowe, all of you, thank you so much. Please get the word out, and all those others who are watching, not only Second Baptist members, but our friends across the country, and we're grateful and thankful for each and every one of you. This morning, we do want to remind you too that our mission. This was our Swagger Sunday. Had a great day today in the Lord. Sister
Lourdes.
Minister Lourdes Townsend spoke at 8 o'clock. Did a phenomenal job, and then at 11 o'clock. We had the other part of that tag team, Minister Kevin Townsend, to speak, and we had our praise team, power team part two, share with us this morning.
Yes.
And did an awesome job. Do want to remind you, not only the Swagger Sunday, but this is our Mission Emphasis Sunday, and we're still doing missions, in particular in Africa and other places around the world, and we thank you so much for your tremendous support as you always give. And so thank you so much for that. And we're going to give you an opportunity to get a little bit of the message, the song today, that the praise team came and performed and did a wonderful job ministering this morning. And after that, we're going to have our guests come on. And so please enjoy this song and stand by. We've got some wonderful guests who's going to come and share with us tonight.
just worship him in here? Can we just speak well of him? Be thou exalted, Lord God. Be thou exalted. Be thou exalted. Oh God. Be thou exalted. Oh sing that again. You are high. You are high and lifted up. Yes, you are, Jesus. Be thou exalted. I feel that right there. You are high. You are high. Yes, you are. And lifted up. Last time. Be thou
Bless you, second. I know that you really were
Hallelujah.
blessed by that, and we apologize for the little sound glitch in the beginning, and we just wanted to welcome you. I just shouted out a few names earlier. You didn't miss a whole lot. Just shout out some names who were watching, and I just want to say we got Sister Taggart and Sister Janice, Magruder Boyd. It's good to see you and hear from you. We pray everything is well.
Yes.
Give us a call. Let us know how things are going.
Amen.
But for all of you, we're grateful tonight, and I know you're blessed by the ministry of the Power Team. They are so gifted. But tonight, honey, we've got some great guests tonight, and we want who joining us, and we want to thank. We have Felicia Morales, Sister Tanoa Bettis, and Brother James Presley. Sister Tanoa has been with us before. She's been a former guest. We want to welcome her back, and we got a very important subject tonight, dealing with grief, and we know that, especially during this pandemic, many
Yeah.
people have experienced grief, and we are just grateful that we've got a host of talented people who are been dealing with that, and we've got a grief ministry that's led by Sister Felicia, and so we welcome you to the program, everyone. Miss Bettis, you need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Hello, everyone.
Good. And welcome,
Sorry.
Brother Presley and Sister Morales. Welcome as well to the program.
Hey,
Good. So I just introduced you, but tell us a little bit about yourselves. And since Felicia, you are at the top of my screen, tell us about what
okay.
you do, and tell us a little about the grief ministry a second.
So I'm in charge of the aftercare ministry. And what we do is we help people who are struggling with the loss of a loved one. A lot of times when you're going through loss, everything seems topsy-turvy. And the Lord laid on my heart to make a difference, just to help you navigate your way through. So I'm here just to help you hear God better and to know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Because weeping
Amen.
endures for a night, but joy really does come in the morning.
Yeah.
Amen.
And Brother Preston, we know that you do some work around grief and death and dying. So we want to tell us a little bit what you're doing.
Thank you for having me. So as you said, my name is Reverend James Presley. I am a grief counselor by profession for a local hospice company. I also work with juvenile adolescents that are experiencing various behavioral struggles, and I provide in-home community supports for them.
Okay, good. And Tanoa, we've had you before, and welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. I am a licensed clinician. I work in the community. I'm in private practice, Parent Connections Counseling. I also work for a major children's hospital. I do a little bit of everything. I'm a psychotherapist, but what I've been dealing with the most lately are issues related to grief and loss. So this was definitely a pleasure. This has been a hot topic for about 1 year and 3 months now. And I feel like it will continue to be a hot topic. Loss is an everyday process. Grief is an everyday process. So they vacillate, and emotion. So I feel like this is an ongoing subject. So thank you for having me.
Good. Well, we're grateful to
Again.
have all of you, and as you said, Tanoa, and especially during the pandemic. But death and dying has always been going on since the fall of Adam, and so we've always been dealing with the process of grieving, and we know that people grieve differently, and and we hope to talk about tonight the different types of grieving, the different stages of grief, and so who wants to start off tonight?
I'm more than willing to start off because I know it's coming behind me. So
All right.
I know they got some fire. We were all together.
Absolutely.
We were all together last week, and so I know it's coming. So when you talk about, I guess what I would like to start with is the difference. People talk about the differences between grief and loss, right? So grief is ultimately the process that helps you adjust to a loss, and a loss could mean different things. When we think about loss, people mostly resort to death, right? But that's not the only form of loss that people experience. Sometimes people, lose their jobs. Sometimes people lose relationships. Sometimes people, lose their animals that they consider to be family. Sometimes people lose resources, and believe it or not, people do grieve their resources. People, the one thing that COVID has showed us is that you cannot bet on anything but God, right? So, people were working, big jobs, and then one day they were told, okay, we're downsizing and you're going to be working from home and your salary is cut in half. So as a clinician, I have worked with people who have experienced a multitude of loss, right? Loss of freedom. I talked about this before where, every morning some of us would get up and say our prayers, get in our cars, and we would, just drive to work. And that whole process was a routine that we had gotten used to. And it was very good for our mental and our social health, right? Even our emotional health. But we lost all of that with the pandemic. So when we talk about loss, you don't want to get stuck just at grief, although that is like the major loss because you're losing a loved one, family or friends. However, grief is ultimately the process that vacillates between different emotions, mostly anger and denial. And loss is the end result. Grief is the process to adjust to help you accept the loss in your life. So they do run together. They vacillate between each other. But sometimes we get stuck and say, loss, hey, nobody died. But, we have to be mindful that everything loss is an individualized process and it means something different to everyone.
Oh,
That's
wow.
right. That's right.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in?
As Tanoa has already said, the loss is the activating event, and grief is the response to that activating event, which is the loss. A lot of times we come to the table and we're trying to help people cope with grief, and before we can help them cope with grief, we have to help them understand that or try to help them normalize what they are experiencing. Before we can try to help people normalize that, we have to educate them on the various reactions that they may have that are associated with grief. A lot of times people are experiencing these different things and they don't want to come forward, or they don't want to seek help because they think that what they're experiencing is not normal. So I'm appreciative that you have allowed this space and this opportunity where we can try to help shape and educate individuals and normalize the grief experience and the journey.
One of the things, though, I think you have a unique perspective because working with hospice, you deal with not only the grief of the loss, but also dealing with people who are at the end of life. And so, what's that process like?
Well, in hospice, in order to qualify, the person is expected to transition within six months or less in order to qualify for hospice. Sometimes there's an extension because at the end of the day, God has the final say on when a person transitions. But in that process, us as grief counselors, it's very difficult because sometimes when you are expecting a person to transition, sometimes the grief process actually has started before the person has even transitioned, because you have that you're anticipating that loss. So the grief process has already started. So a lot of times when the person does transition, it kind of complicates the grief process because you kind of dealt with it twice. You dealt with it while you're waiting for the transition, and now you're dealing with it again now that they've actually transitioned. So we have tried to help provide supports and strategies for individuals to cope during that very difficult process.
Like what? Now I'm gonna let my wife get in. But could you give me what are some of the strategies that are used for someone who's that they're dealing with someone at the end of life? They've been told that or even the person themselves who have been told that they may have 6 months or less to live.
So the person themselves, we have a team in hospice that works together. It's an interdisciplinary team, which includes social workers, chaplains, grief counselors, nurses that help work as a team, and we collaborate to create a plan not only for the actual patient, but also for the patient's family. To help them cope as well. So during that process, we work with the person. Sometimes the chaplain will have to help them get over some things that they have not been resolved with themselves. Angry at God, angry at their circumstances, angry at the fact that they haven't been able to experience or do all they wanted to do in life. Everyone's circumstance is different. We also work with the family to help them and provide them with supports while they are actually dealing with the end of life process and of death and dying of a loved one or a friend. And then once the person actually transitions, we work with the family to actually provide grief support. We provide grief counseling. We provide the same as Sister Morales. We provide grief support groups. We do in-home community supports where we're actually going to the community and see the family. They can come to our office. We work with them we meet them technically where they are. I think we'll get into it a little later, but it's very important to understand that no two individuals actually grieve the same. So what may cause me to grieve or how I respond to it will be distinctly different from what Sister Tanoa or Sister Morales may experience in grief. So what we do is we try to develop an individualized plan to help meet them where they are.
Yeah.
So, Sister Tanoa, one of the things you did share, which I thought was quite interesting, is the idea of the loss. Because usually, even for myself, when I hear of people saying, I've lost someone, it's usually based around the someone and in terms of grief. But I like that knowledge of understanding that loss does not necessarily have to mean death. Loss could be that, like you said, that of the job, that of having a large salary, and as a
A
result of
divorce or anything.
yeah. And so those different types of laws, are the strategies that you use are similar, or are they different depending on
Loss.
the different laws?
I think they're quite similar because the first strategy is acceptance. You have to accept that something is gone, is no more. So I think that the most important part for family, friends, and supportive communities is to provide validation of that person's loss, no matter what it is. And a lot of that is centered in verbiage. Sometimes people say, oh, well, you can get another one, get over it, or it's been too long. Those are very detrimental and unhelpful statements to make to someone who has had a loss, no matter what it is. I mean, we already know that the loss spectrum is large, right? So it doesn't matter what the loss is because, like I said before, it's an individualized process. And we can't take for granted that people are going to adjust. Minister Preston said, we cannot take for granted that because someone else has lost something and they responded in one way, that another person will respond the same way. So the strategies are the same. And the biggest strategy is acceptance and validation.
Well, Felicia, we have you on it. As you know, we have so many. Second does a lot of community funerals, and we try to make sure that if anyone needs a church for a funeral, or needs someone to eulogize a person, that we always offer that to anyone in the community. And we also, one of the, that when we try to serve the community in their time of bereavement. But I think one of the greater parts of ministry is, we have great deacons ministry that also do the follow up as well and serve, but also the grief ministry. And you brought that ministry a number of years ago now. I don't know how long it's been, and it's been such a tremendous blessing to so many people, who really struggle with grief, and I think all of us, have been through that process, and come out different ways and in different times. Tell us a little bit about the grief ministry that we have at Second, and what and some of the and some of what you do.
Okay, so the grief ministry that we have at Second, and it's like what Sister Day said and what Sister Tanoa said as well. Grief itself is just the response of a loss, and it could be anything. The reason why I did bereavement first is because even though we lose things and we lose relationships, like you can grieve if you're divorced, you could grieve if your child is run away from home. There's a lot of grief, but we trust that God is able to repair, and somehow there'll be a restoration in some way. But when a person leaves, when God takes a person home, you'll see them again, because we don't start to have no hope. So our hope is that we'll see them again when we go home to be with the Lord as well. But there's a hole in your heart that'll never be filled by that person again. That relationship has been severed until, we get back home, right? So what we do in grief ministry is help people to lean into the grief itself, because unfortunately, as believers, we think that we're not supposed to sorrow, but that's not what Scripture says. Scripture says we don't sorrow as those who have no hope, but it doesn't say that we don't sorrow. And from the Old Testament to the New, it tells you that there's a season for everything, even this time, a season for mourning. And then in the New Testament, Jesus mourned over the loss of Lazarus, even though he knew he was coming back. So he did it to remind us that the way we feel is okay. It's normal. We grieve, our hearts mourn the loss of a person we love because we love them. We mourn deeply when we love deeply. So it's okay. Love is the heart, is the basis of the grief. It's because we lost the love that we love so great. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what we do in Grief Share is get people to understand it's okay to cry. It's okay to say, I don't want to go home today because there's nobody home when I get there.
Yeah.
It's okay to say that it's a new normal that your life is taking on. It's okay to lean into the grief, because If you lean into it, then God can heal you through it. But if you try to pretend that it's not there, you're doing a disservice to yourself. And so people get stuck. They get stuck in anger. They can get stuck in depression. They can get stuck because they're not allowing their bodies to go through and their emotions. Because there's a lot of emotions. There's psychological, physiological, and there's a lot that comes in. And even in our physical bodies, if we're grieving, we get sick, we get headaches, we can't sleep. There's a lot of things that happen. Our bodies will respond. If we pretend that nothing's going on, we are hurting ourselves even more. And then a lot of times, if we don't allow God to heal us, we'll just become bitter and we'll become despondent, and we'll go through the motions, but we won't have peace. So we just try to help people to understand it's okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to miss. And so we have and we deal with a lot of topics pertaining to grief, pertaining to the loss of a loved one, from a regular, and I don't want to say regular because that's not a good word, but I'll use it because that's what people are used to hearing. Like if my mom passes at 93, I know the chances are my mom is going to pass before I pass. And even if my mom knows the Lord, I'm happy for that. But I still miss my mom. It doesn't change the loneliness I have in my heart. So it's okay that you cry for that.
Yeah.
God understands that.
Yeah.
So we help people understand that God understands how you feel. He's trying to help you to understand that in the midst of every emotion, He is with you.
Yeah.
In every emotion,
Go ahead, Sister
He is still
Daisy.
there.
So my thoughts are kind of all over the place. I was wondering the reason why I'm asking, because I don't want to get so emotional myself because I just lost my dad in January due to COVID-19,
Mhm. So
and
sorry, sister.
I have my moments,
Yes,
when I'm fine, but I have those moments when I'm not so fine that other people
right,
may not know that I'm not so fine because it's not
right,
something that you go around broadcasting that you may not be doing well today.
right.
But for people like me who lost someone, but also who is trying to provide support to someone else who might have lost someone, may not
hmm
been from COVID, but need that support. What do you recommend?
So even if you are going through grief yourself and you're still trying to help somebody, that's okay. It's all right. But there's going to be times you don't feel like it. What you should not do is make yourself feel obligated to do. Because here's what God is so great in the way He handles things. While He's healing you and you're concerned about somebody else, He has a way of providing for other people as well. Um, Grief ministry, and you can get involved with grief ministry or recommend grief ministry to somebody else. It's so like when we lose someone that we love, sometimes we feel like talking, and sometimes we just don't feel like talking. Some For those of us who have already lost loved ones and we're just there to support other people, the hardest thing for us to do is to say anything because we're not comfortable ourselves with grief. In grief ministry and in grief share, there's a term that says healing presence. And what that means is just be the shoulder that I need, be the ear that I need, be the arms that I need. Don't fix anything for me because I don't know what I need to be fixed. Just let me have a safe place where I can go and say how I feel without judgment or anything. Understand that I'm a person and I have feelings and I'm missing,
Yeah.
you know, so it's okay. So if you can't, Sister Days, it's all right. Give yourself permission to not be able to do it today.
You,
Tomorrow you might be able to.
you know,
But if on the days you can't, it's okay.
one of the things that is interesting now is the pandemic. With the pandemic, our grief process has changed totally, in terms of family getting together, being there for support, friends being there for support.
Yeah.
We were limited to, less than 100, and the times were limited. We did our funerals in a shortened, abbreviated because of the law, and not want to expose people to the pandemic. How do you think that affected people's grieving process when we couldn't grieve the normal way, during the pandemic?
It was an interruption in the grieving process. It just was. And that in itself is considered to be a complicated grief. So complicated grief, on top of everything else, for example, I'll give you a complicated grief concerning death and then just in general. For example, we have people that we know in our congregation who have lost several loved ones, like within a short span of time. That's called a complicated grief because as they're mourning one, there's some more and they haven't even dealt with that loss. Then they're mourning somebody else. And then if the relationship between the two people that they lost are not the same, then they're going to be complicated thinking, well, did I love that one more than I love that one? How can I care about this one and cry more about this one? So there's a lot of things that complicate the process of grief itself. You understand? For example, another complicated grief is with death is if somebody commits suicide. That the family is left with not just the fact that they lost the person they love. Then on top of it, what could I have done to prevent the grief? For the suicide. How could I have missed the signs? What kind of parent was I? What kind of spouse was I? Or what kind of sibling was I? Or friend was I? That I didn't notice my best friend or the person I cared about the most, that they were hurting so bad that they thought they had no hope. If there's a car crash or a plane crash, and they can't find the body of a loved one, that's a complicated grief because that's not put to bed. You'll never see the body. There's something about seeing the body. Back to what you're asking, Pastor Days. There's something about seeing the actual body. It gives you some sort of finality from it. But when there's no finality to it, it causes more trauma and more turmoil. So it interrupts the process. You know what I'm saying? Because we know this is what's supposed to happen. But I never got a chance to even hug my loved one. I never got a chance to say goodbye to my loved one. I left them at the door of the hospital. Yeah. I don't know if they were treating them right. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know if they felt that I didn't care. So all that's called complicated grief. And God heals you from that. But that's when people like to know and Presley are very important, because in addition to grief ministries and stuff like that, there needs to be people who are able to help people grasp how they feel pertaining to that loss, how they can, because there's guilt involved. There's a lot of stuff that comes involved with that whole process itself. So that's when people who love you play a really important part. If you're supporting somebody who's lost a loved one, especially during the pandemic, you have to know what's appropriate to say and what's not appropriate to say. No one has a right to tell people how long they should grieve, what's too much, why aren't you grieving? Because, they don't know if people are in shock. They don't know if they don't know what to do, because the body has a way of protecting them.
Before we go too far, I'd like for the other guests to respond to that because.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
No. One of what you're saying is so great and on point, but I think, during the pandemic, people with COVID were going to the hospitals. They were not able to visit them in the hospital, and and so they would go in and then come out, and then they would, pass away. So they wouldn't be able to spend that time with them during their sickness, and then the shortened time and the abbreviated way that we did services. So I'd like for more for our other guests to comment on that as well.
Sure.
Yeah, if I may. So the grieving process actually appeared to have been complicated from a stance of, say, a person that goes into the hospital, as the point you made, and they transition while they're in there. And during the pandemic, hospitals have shut down where there were no visitors there. There was very limited access to the hospital or to the patient or their loved one. And our hospice nurses, what they were doing is in that last hour, they were trying to do what is FaceTime, which is still difficult, where we allowed the patient to FaceTime with their loved one so that they can try to have some type of closure and say their goodbyes or whatever they needed to say. But then again, after the person transitioned, you had the pandemic that restricted funerals. At that time, there were only I believe most churches had closed down. Funeral homes were doing funerals, but they were restricting to, I believe, 10 people at a time, and you had to either rotate in or rotate out. Um, Not only are you having problems grieving, and a complicated grief at that, but now you also have an issue where you're creating some family dissension, because now who determines who the 10 people that get to attend the funeral? How do you arrive at that list? So while you're trying to lay your loved one to rest in the most dignified way that you possibly can during a pandemic that really shapes how you can do that, you're also dealing with trying to maneuver family members that want to be there and say their goodbyes and closure and have closure and peace at the same time. So now you have a dual issue going while trying to get peace and closure. So it's been very problematic, if that's a word to use, while trying to assist individuals along the grief journey, because before they could deal with that grief, they have a lot of other issues that came out of the death that resulted as a result of that.
So I just want to put a spin onto what my co-host said. You know, when you think about all the conditions that they laid out, that comes with a sense of trauma. That's traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, extremely traumatic when your loved one is dying and you can't be there to consult, to oversee, to hold their hand, to provide them the sense of touch. A lot of people that I worked with use the word traumatized. I was traumatized watching my loved one transition over FaceTime, seeing them through a window, you know, things like this gave people a sense of trauma. Now, when I say trauma, many people think that there's been some type of physical act, right? Trauma expounds way past accidents and disasters. Trauma is an individualized experience. And if any process that you go through has been jilted by that, or if you start adding in extra factors, of course, that's going to become a traumatic experience. So now you're dealing with trauma, you're dealing with grief, you're dealing with loss, you're dealing with depression, you're dealing with sadness, you're dealing with all different types of emotions all at one time. So it becomes almost like an acute stress disorder. And we're not even going to factor in the financial piece of that, right? There's a business side to that. But we're not even going to put that in, but that all compounds together.
Yeah, and as we never closed during we did funerals all during the pandemic. So we tried to serve families as best we could, but in dealing with it, just trying to explain and as you're right, just to dealing with who's going to come, and being able to get people to the funeral from out of state in a timely manner. It was very, very, very difficult, not only for the family, it was also difficult for us because dealing with knowing that added sense of burden that was on the family and trying our best to minister to them during their time of bereavement and doing it on a short fashion, in terms of not being able to meet with the families prior to trying to do everything, by phone, not being able to meet with them personally all the time. It was very difficult in trying to, a lot of good things came out of the pandemic in terms of technology and how our outreach, but there were some things that the pandemic just exacerbated the problem in reaching, and I feel that's one of the areas that we were, was most difficult for churches and for our ministry dealing with people during that time. So I'd like to get some closing words from each one of you as relates to, but before I do that, let me ask this question because, I run across people all the time who are grieving and, have been grieving for a while, and I know they need help and need some supportive services. And I always recommend that they get, some support, that some ongoing sustained support. And sometimes it's very difficult for them to reach out. There are those of us who grieve and we have to grieve publicly, other people, they grieve and they're grieving privately. But, and I think it's sometimes more difficult, grieving publicly when everybody's watching you and see how you deal with it, versus somebody may not necessarily be as well known. But what are suggestions to for those who are watching that may be going through it and just don't feel comfortable, getting that support, or they may know somebody and know they need the help but not getting it. So what is your suggestion to them?
I guess if I could just start, I would say connection. You know, try to find some form of connections, because when you isolate, it just turns into like a intrinsic process, and you get alone with your thoughts, and those thoughts become faulty thoughts and unhelpful thoughts. So I would say, even if you have a good friend, or you have a church group, or even if you reach out to the alcove that's out in Atlantic County or Ocean County or Cape May County, I'm sorry, you can always find someone, even if you feel more comfortable connecting with someone that you don't know, that you feel like you can be transparent with and not be judged, or not be, well, why are they not healing? Like, why are they still caught up in this? Whatever you can do to keep yourself connected to others is what I would say, is most important. And then if it becomes where the grief is starting to affect more than one domain of your life, and of course I'm going to say, seek clinical counseling at that,
Yeah.
clinical support at that point.
Yeah.
Mental health, grief, anxiety, depression are not really talked about in our culture. Sometimes they're not talked about in the church. So I appreciate these type of platforms that allow a space for these conversations to occur, because the more we have these type of conversations, the more individuals are more likely to seek help or be more comfortable understanding what it is that they're going through. I always tell my clients that, listen, if you're going through the grief process, you can allow the grief process to be prolonged or complicated because you don't deal with it. We can ignore it. We can act like we're in denial. We can have anger. We can have all of those different things that are on the stage of grief. But if we don't deal with it, and if we don't deal with it in a healthy manner, our body will force us to deal with it, right? Our body will start to shut down. We'll start reaching for things that we've never reached for before: alcohol, drugs. We'll be going to the doctors because we're experiencing different health conditions and things of that nature. And we think we're okay, but our body is really telling us that we're not. And different things will start to happen that we've never experienced. So I always encourage people, listen, the church is always open. Second has been very innovative in not only reaching the church family, but reaching the community at large. There are clinicians that are a part of Second. I always recommend people or individuals to Noah Bettis. She's a private clinician, owns her own practice. I refer individuals to Alcove Center for Grieving, which is on Tilton Road in Northfield. There are resources that are available. It's important that you maybe attend a support group. You can do that online if you don't feel comfortable going and showing your face to individuals. But if you're grieving and you're going through that grief process, you need some type of support, and it's important to do that sooner than later. That way you can have a healthy manner of grieving.
Right. Additionally, Pastor Days, additionally, what you could do is, like, sometimes, like, some people won't reach out, but those people hopefully has a support system, like Reverend Presley was saying and Sister Tano was saying, because you have to know your friend. If you know that your friend is shrinking away, like, if they look different, if they're behaving different, they may not have the ability to say, I'm hurting, but you say, listen, how are you doing? Check, see how they're feeling, how you eating, let's go take a walk. Go along. You have to let compassion be the order of the day. If that's somebody you care about, you have to go alongside them to help them, to encourage them until they're able to say, I think I need to see somebody. That's when your relationships with other people are so, so, so important.
I was just reading some of the comments which is from Sister Kimberly, and also from Stacy, who went through some loss. And I'm just going to read one from Stacy. Her mom went into the hospital through COVID-19, and it was hard not to go see her. She came home, but she lost her aunt, and only 30 people were in the family were able to come to the funeral. And then it was that closed casket where they couldn't, they could not see her. And so, this has been a very, very difficult time for so many. And not just, I mean, we're talking thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people in this country, and I know people who didn't even have a funeral at all because it was just too complicated. And so, this is going to be, it's going to have a long-term effect. When everything is open, this is going to have a long-term effect. And tonight for all of our viewers, we were not able to cover all the issues, and there's so many issues. But we wanted to expose you to some help and some things to kind of let you to normalize getting help. That that there are opportunities, there are people, and these are people you see in your community. You don't, I mean, these are people, faces of people that you can come to, talk to, and direct you in areas where you can find the help and support that you need in order uh, to get through it. And we're here. We're here as a church family, but we are also here. We've got people who have the experience and have the training to assist, and also the resources to recommend you and get with somebody you feel and connect. So I want to thank all of you for coming on and sharing. And we just just hit the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to this, and we've got to look at doing something that's going to be sustainable to help ongoing to help those who are going through. And and COVID and the pandemic is not over. We've opened up the
That's right.
city, and we've taken off the mask, and we're going about our business. But death and dying is going to be with us till the Lord comes back. So I want to thank you all
That's
so
right.
much for coming. I want you to give some closing remarks and some closing words of encouragement to those who might be grieving tonight. Takoa, you're muted. There
Am
you
I?
go.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
no, there
okay,
you go.
okay. So
To
I just
Noah,
want
I'm
to
sorry.
say that
Go ahead.
I just want to say that grief is a normal process.
Mhm.
It is not a timed process, and to walk into this process knowing that you are supported. I know when James had spoke earlier about how they help, how they start the grief process even before the transition. I think that's very important. That's a very important point. But I don't, I also talk about that not in just the loss of life, but in any loss that you may experience in your life. Walk into it knowing that it's a process and that you're not being timed, you're not being judged, and make it an individualized process. And don't ever make excuse for the process. And if you feel like it's more than you can bear, you know, reach into your spiritual, supports, but also don't be afraid of those pinnacle supports because that's what they're there for.
And just to add on to what Tanoa has just add on to what Tanoa has said, the grieving process is normal. It doesn't look the same for any two individuals. If you are able to seek help and you need to seek help during the grief process, don't be afraid to do that. I know there's a stigma in our culture for seeking help for different things associated with grief and mental health and different things of that nature. But it's a normal process. If you don't seek the help, like I said earlier, your body will start to send you signs and different other things will start to happen. The grief process is a normal process. No one goes down the same journey. Sometimes you'll feel irritable. There are different reactions that you will have. Sometimes you won't want to be bothered. There are different things that you'll experience during the process. That's why it's important that when you start to experience these things, that you talk to someone. Like I said, the church is available. We know Pastor Dave does counseling, Noah does counseling. I'm available. One thing we can let you know that there's a sense of trust, there's a sense of privacy, and there's a sense of confidentiality, which I also think keeps people from seeking help. And Sister Felicia is also available as well.
Yeah. Sister
Amen.
Morales?
Thank you. Yes, and in closing, just want to say that while you're grieving, we are here for you. We have grief share class every Thursday from 7 o'clock via Zoom. The information is on our webpage. Please feel free to come. Um, call me.
Posted. It's also posted,
Okay.
and you can just hit the link and get you there.
Yes,
Yeah, good.
yes, absolutely. And know that we care. We love you. We're praying for you.
Thank all of you for coming and sharing. Thank everyone today for joining us tonight. This is a very important subject, and there's so many people have been affected by this. And let's be loving, let's be supportive, and let's share the resources that we might have that to help and assist people through. We really appreciate all of you tonight, and you have been such a tremendous blessing and help to us. And we're going to have you back on again because I think this is so important. And let's expand it. Let's do some more things together with this to help people through this process. Thank all of you tonight for sharing with us. Thank all of you for, my wife disappeared again, but she does that from time to time. Thank all of you, our friends, and we look forward to seeing you Sunday morning, and then again Sunday evening. Thank God for each and every one of you. May God bless you real good. Good night.
Thank you.
God
Good night.
bless. Thank
Good
you.
night.
For
Good
having us.
night. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
I, I said, I said, thank you for, thank you for having us. This was so important. This was so important.